Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is John McDougall. I am the event coordinator at Murder by the Book here in Houston, and I'm super excited about tonight's event. But before we get started, I just wanted to make some general store announcement stuff. So if you have not been in to visit us in a while, we've been open since October for customers to come in. We don't have a capacity limit anymore. We are encouraging but not requiring masks at the moment. So if you feel comfortable, if you're vaccinated and you feel comfortable taking off your mask, you're welcome to do that in the store. If you're not vaccinated, we're not going to ask you when you come in, but we just ask that you be courteous of everybody else around us and mask up. We do still have a lot of kids that come in that can't get vaccinated yet, and we also still have a lot of immunocompromised customers that come visit us who are getting treatment at MD Anderson's. We just hope that you just kind of be respectful. If you are not getting out just yet and you still want to do curbside pickup, you can always give us a call when you pull into the store parking lot, and we are happy to run books out to you. I'm also super excited. We just announced in yesterday's email newsletter, if you haven't gotten it yet, one of the most asked questions we've been getting since March of 2020 is when are we going to have, actually the question that we've been getting is when are we going to have author events like normal? But we don't know what normal is going to look like yet, because now that we were able to do these virtual things, we don't know how that is going to impact publishers sending people out on the road, what hybrid events are going to look like, things like that. But short version is we're super excited. We actually have 3 or 4 actual in-store events on the calendar for September. We are going to kick it off on September 4th with a familiar face to most of you. Dean, aka Miranda James, will be signing his new Cat in the Stacks book with us. At the moment, the plan is for the events to run as normal as possible. We'll have signing lines. You'll be able to meet the authors. Obviously, the way the world has worked lately, things can change quickly. So we're keeping an eye on vaccination levels. We're keeping an eye on these new variants that are popping up. So we do, reserve the right to potentially have to tweak some stuff between now and September. But as of today, the plan is normal events going forward starting in September. Each publisher is doing things differently. Authors are doing things differently. So don't expect a full event calendar to happen. Probably not until next year if we get a full event calendar at all. Like I said, we don't know how things are going to go virtually versus in store, but definitely expect some stuff to pop up in the fall. I think those are all of my general announcements. Also wanted to mention, if you were watching on Facebook, sometimes when we have events, we have some spammers pop up and say like, oh, to watch this event, click here. Don't do that. It's spam. I will keep an eye on those and block them as they pop up. And while I'm chatting with Ellie and Kate tonight, if you have questions for either of them, please post those in the comments and we are definitely going to get to them. So I'm going to get us started. First, we are going to bring out Kate Carlisle, whose newest book, A Little Black Book, has just come out Tuesday. How are you today, Kate?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. It's so good to see you.
It's great to see you. And thanks so much for inviting me.
Oh, and like as we were saying, before we got started, it had been a while since you've been to Houston. So I'm sad we can't do this in store, but I'm so excited we at least get to chat with you virtually about the new book. And we do have, if you guys order the new book or any of Kate's books from us, we have signed book plates. So you'll get one of those. So a native Californian, New York Times bestselling author, Kate Carlisle worked in television for many years before turning to writing. A lifelong fascination with the art and craft of bookbinding led her to write the Bibliophile Mysteries, featuring Brooklyn Wainwright, whose bookbinding and restoration skills invariably uncover old secrets, treachery, and murder. She is also the author of the Fixer Upper Mysteries, featuring small-town girl Shannon Hammer, a building contractor specializing in home restoration. We are also excited tonight to have Ellie Alexander back with us. How are you tonight, Ellie?
I'm great. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for doing this. And so Ellie is here to talk about her new book, Mocha, She Wrote, which is the newest in the Bakeshop series, which also just came out Tuesday. This last Tuesday was like just a crazy wealth of new cozy releases. There were so many new books that came out this week. We also have signed book plates to go with Ellie's books. So if you order them from us, we have book plates as well. So Ellie Alexander is a Pacific Northwest native who spends ample time testing pastry recipes in her home kitchen or at one of the many famed coffee houses nearby. When she's not coated in flour, you'll find her outside exploring hiking trails and trying to burn off calories consumed in the name of research. She is the author of the Bakeshop Mysteries, including Meet Your Baker and A Batter of Life and Death, as well as the Sloan Krause Mysteries. So as I mentioned, if you guys have questions while we are chatting, please make sure to pop those up. I'm seeing lots of familiar names in the comments, so I'm sure we're going to have some good questions tonight. I'm so glad we've got a great crowd tuning in. So I'm going to get us started real easy. Let's start with Ellie. Can you tell everybody a little bit about kind of who your series character is and a little bit about the new book?
Absolutely. The main character of this series is Juliet Montague Capshaw, because this series is set here in Ashland, where I live, which is home of the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. And true story, the Oregon Shakespeare Festival is on stage at the Elizabethan this weekend for the first time since March of 2019. I know, it's so exciting. So Juliet is sort of a romantic at heart, hence her name. She had to be. I grew up with a English professor dad who taught Shakespeare. So I was forced as a kid to practice sonnets and soliloquies, and my mom was a mystery reader. So I gravitated more towards my mom's books than my dad's. But I appreciate getting to add a touch of Shakespeare into the series. Juliet's a pastry chef. She's come home to Ashland to heal her broken heart. And in this book, this is book 13 of the series, it's all about coffee, hence Mocha She Wrote. So there's lots of coffee cutthroat competitions going on. And the star barista, Andy, who readers have gotten to know over the course of the series, is going to kind of take center stage in this one.
And so, because I know someone's going to ask, so what is the first book in the series? And do you think people need to jump in with the first book, or do you think they can start with this new one?
The first book in the series is Meet Your Baker. I am personally of the camp that I think you should start a series from the beginning as a reader and a writer. But I'm curious, Kate, what do you think in terms of series?
I have to start at the beginning. In fact, when I've been asked to give an author quote for a book and it's like book number 5 or 6, I have to read the whole series before I can give a quote. It's sickness. But the books are, as true for you too, the books have a self-contained mystery and all that. But the thing about cozies is that the characters are what, create the community and the setting and everything. So it's kind of fun to see the arc, the character arc, and what's happening, and what's happening with mom and what's happening with so and so. And so I like to start at the beginning.
I will scandalize you both, and I jump into series mid-series a lot, but usually because as a bookseller, it's always helpful. Like if I haven't read something, sometimes I'm like, oh, this sounds really great. Yeah. I can't always go back, but it's also good to know if a customer says, hey, can I jump in somewhere with this? I mean, most authors are really great about catching you up, but sometimes it's good to know from the book selling aspect, oh yeah, you can totally jump in there. So Kate, can you tell us a little bit about the new one, Little Black Book, and who the character in your series is?
My series is the Bibliophile Mysteries. The main character is Brooklyn Wainwright, who's a rare book restoration expert, or bookbinder, in other words. But she works on a book in each of my books. And that book is the catalyst for the murder and the mystery. And it also provides the central core of the plot and the suspects. Because each book brings in new, owners of the book and, stories about the book. So this book, Little Black Book, the book is Rebecca. It's a first edition, British edition, and it's a black book. And it shows up on Brooklyn's doorstep, and several hours later, it's the same day. I'm way ahead of that. I'm 2 books ahead, so I'm trying to remember. So it's a young woman arrives and demands to come in and is looking for the package that her aunt in Scotland sent to Derek, Brooklyn's husband. And her aunt is gone missing, and she thinks that this package will solve the mystery of what happened to the aunt. But she doesn't know what's in the package. She just saw a postage slip in her aunt's apartment somewhere outside of Inverness, Scotland. And that starts a whole adventure. She's being followed. The guy that's following her winds up dead. No spoilers, but that's pretty obvious from the get-go. But and then they just have to go from San Francisco to Dharma, her hometown, in Sonoma in the wine country. And then from there, they go to Scotland, as you do.
And so, Kate, what's the first book in the Bibliophile series?
The first book is Homicide in hardcover. And you don't have to start with the first book.
You do.
But you should. You really should.
You should.
So you mentioned, Kate, that, because you bring in all of these different books, it's a good avenue to bring in new people into the story. So one of the questions I wanted to talk about is, so as you're writing a cozy series, and we're, as Ellie said, she's like 13 books into the series. How many into the series are you for this one, Kate?
This is 15.
15. Wow. So, how do you deal with what they call kind of the Cabot Cove syndrome when you're that far into a series? I know it's a little easier for you, Kate, because they're kind of set now kind of in San Francisco, so it's a bigger city. But so let's start with you, Kate. How do you tackle that?
Well, it's not really a problem because, as I said, the book itself brings in new suspects and new characters in the story, and her small town in Sonoma, there's been a murder or two out there, but she has an extended family. She knows everyone in town, so I don't really kill off those people. I kill the people off that brought her book. And San Francisco, right? I mean, it's a big city, which I didn't know you weren't supposed to do that in cozy. So, but oh well.
Oh, that's one of the things I love about the series. That attracted me from book one, because you've done such a good job. Like, her little corner of San Francisco feels, villagey too, I feel like.
Yeah, it's the book arts community and the library, and so the same people. You see the same people, which is kind of a key to the cozy genre.
And how about you, Ellie?
Well, when I first started writing the series, I was living north of Ashland. I am a native to Vancouver, Washington, which is just right across the river from Portland, Oregon. And I grew up coming to Ashland, again, because my dad was it still is a Shakespeare buff. So we would come down for plays and everything. And when I started thinking about this series, I thought Ashland is like the quintessential little English village. And it's funky, it's the same sort of thing. It's an artistic community. You have the theater, lots of outdoorsy stuff. When I wrote Meet Your Baker, I came down to a bookstore event here in Ashland for the first time. And I don't usually get nervous talking to people. But I started, kind of my talk and everything, and I'm reading the crowd, and I'm so nervous because I'm writing about a real place that I don't live. I've just visited quite often. And I get done with my talk, and I kid you not, every hand in the audience raises, and my stomach just drops. I think I'm going to puke right now because clearly I've gotten it totally wrong. And everyone was like, you realize there are no murders here. There hasn't been a murder for like 20 years or something, which the only murder that has taken place in Ashland in recent history was a beheading on the train tracks, which is super gruesome and not cozy. I know.
Not cozy.
Not cozy. So I do often feel that idea of you have to kind of suspend some reality if you're writing a cozy, but you also do with a bookbinder or a pastry chef solving a crime. So it's all part of that. But the beautiful thing of having Shakespeare and sort of this big influx of tourists is that we have a lot of people coming in. So like Kate's saying, if you're pretty sleuthy, you might start to figure out like, oh, it's weird that none of the village is ever a suspect for real.
It's like those first 5 Louise Penny books that are all set in the village, and you always know, oh, somebody came to show up at Three Pines to visit around the holidays. They're not going to make it very long here. Yeah.
Exactly.
So each of you have kind of what we call in the cozy world, kind of a hook to the series. Kate, you mentioned, each book has a different book in it. And Ellie, do you have, with the last couple, the previous one, Chilled to the Cone, you kind of focus a little bit more on ice cream and setting up the ice cream thing. And then with this one, it's kind of more coffee based. So as you're sitting down and kind of starting to get those first ideas for the next book, what comes first to you? Is it a plot and then you figure out where the hook is going to come in? Or is it that hook element and then you start kind of building the plot around it? Let's start with Ellie this time.
Oh, yeah, I think that's a great question. For me, I think because they're so character driven, and that is the gift of cozies. We get attached to these characters. They feel like friends. Hopefully it feels like that to readers. I know for me, every time I sit down to work on a new book, I'm like, oh, okay, my gang's all here again. And it is now hard to live in Ashland because there's not a day that I'm not on the plaza where I'm like, oh, I should just go grab a coffee at Tort. No, that's in your head. Like, that's not real. So I think for me, it's usually the character arc, what's happening. And the gift of writing a series that's going longer is getting to develop the secondary cast of characters too. So usually the story idea is already forming as I'm finishing a book. So like Kate said, the book 13 just came out, but I'm ready to deliver book 15. So I'm thinking at the end of book 15, okay, like what's kind of set up? Where is Jules going next? That sort of thing. So I think that arc is interesting. But I know we're going to pass this to Kate next, and I'm super curious, Kate, if when you set out at the beginning with introducing Derek in book 1, did you have an arc of like when you knew they were actually, is this a spoiler to say they tied the knot? No? Okay.
The arc involved 2 men, Derek and Gabriel.
Right. Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And I was going to do a whole back and forth, and Gabriel was going to be, this whole intriguing thing. And halfway through that book, Derek spoke to me and said, no way.
No.
No. And then I had to find a girl for Gabriel because my editor insisted that she be fabulous. She couldn't just be someone he met at a party. She has to be a CIA operative with, whatever. But I never thought they'd get married because I never thought the series would last this long. I wanted it to last forever because I just fell in love with all these people and they live in my head and I like them better than my own family. But don't tell my family.
They're not watching. They don't know.
But that just evolves from book to book. There's something new that happens. I don't know. I don't think I'm in charge. But anyway, as far as plotting, I always start with the book. I have to have the book first because that kind of starts my mind going in certain directions. And I always try to have a little parallel story in the regular story that kind of coincides with the book itself. Like in one of the books, the book that she's working on is Oliver Twist. And there's a gang of thieves in Oliver Twist. And in my book, there's a gang of book thieves. So little parallels like that that only come up because I've got the book. So once I have the book, I'm good to go. Yeah. Not really. I panic and cry and everything else, but that's my plotting, that's my process.
So how does the research factor in, whether it's trying to research like the bookbinding process, maybe the history of the book that you're going to do, or with you, Ellie, like what recipes you're going to use, things like that? Are those things that you're researching as you're writing, or are you writing the book and then you go back in and fill the research later? Let's start with Kate.
Well, I would much rather be researching recipes and cooking. But as I start with the book, I start looking for books online, and they're usually a rare book, like Rebecca. And then I go on the rare book sites. I used to live in Los Angeles, and there was a whole street. La Cienega was lined with antiquarian bookshops, and you could go there and just soak it all up and, enjoy that world. But now everything's online anyway, even way before the pandemic. It's all online. So I go to the rare book sites. I try to I already have the book in mind, and I start looking for the most expensive books. And they're always $12,000 for this wonderful little book that has been, it's usually been rebound and things like that. So that's where I start my research, and then it goes everywhere. I mean, if I need to, figure out what Derek is driving this year, a new Bentley, as he does. I used to be able to go to the showroom and sit in a Bentley because I wanted to see how big the back seat was. But other than that, I do everything online these days. I mean, and same with Google Earth and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Right. How about you, Ellie?
Oh, well, I have to say, when I moved to Ashland, I met the real life Brooklyn Wainwright, Sophia Vogel, who is an actual bookbinder. And I went to her studio, and we have a mutual love of Kate's books. And she told me that you get it right all the time. She was so impressed. And her safe, you're not even kidding. Like, her safe has these manuscripts in it, or old ancient books that are worth like thousands upon thousands of dollars. So there's so much potential there for stories. Yeah. For me, a lot of times it's more the food always comes last. So I will work on the entire book, and I'll do 2 or 3 rounds of layering, of editing. And then the food is always the very last thing that I do, because when I'm working on a manuscript, it's just whatever is top of mind. I might think like, wow, a cardamom scone sounds great at the moment. And that goes in. And then I have to think like, what can I actually bake? What's realistic? Jules is obviously baking at a much higher level than I am. But a lot of my research is involved in the real working functions of a commercial kitchen. So I pre-COVID, of course, I spent a lot of time inside real pastry kitchens and with real chefs, watching their process, taking notes, seeing, like what that whole vibe is like. I sent Jules on a cruise in a book. And so same thing, I got to go onto the cruise ship. They didn't just send me on a cruise for free. I don't know why they haven't given you a Bentley. It seems like, hey. Yeah, exactly. Come on. It's marketing, right? But anyway, like going into the galley and seeing like what are the quarters like for staff, that sort of thing. And for this book in particular, I had attended in Portland a few barista competitions. It's a real thing. So baristas come together and they make these incredible coffees for this panel of judges. And it is super intense. They have to, it's almost like a sommelier, where you have to be able to cup a coffee and in one sip tell the origin and the altitude that the beans were grown at. And so that part's really fascinating. If I could spend my whole time researching, I would be in heaven.
Yeah, for sure.
So the cruise book was going back. So the cruise book was actually the first one in the Bakeshop series that I read, and then I went back and started. It's so funny. When I was working at Borders, and they had moved Seattle's Best in to kind of take over the cafes instead of them being cafe Borders, we had to go through this like intense coffee training. And I felt so bad for the guy training us, because he would be like, "Okay, taste this coffee. What do you taste?" It'd be like, "I taste coffee." This one, I'm like, it tastes like coffee. He's like, but this is Folgers, and this is, I'm like, it tastes like coffee. I don't have the palate for that. Sorry.
Totally.
So Kate, Joanne wants to know, have you ever bought a rare book with a high price tag on it?
No. But I have some antiquarian books, and they're I came across them in strange ways, like in an old used bookstore in Hollywood had this beautiful leather-bound Marcus Aurelius, and they were charging $12 for it. And, I used to come across things like that. I don't come across those things anymore. But they're out there. And I'll tell this real quick story. A friend of ours is a bookbinder, and he's the kind that does those incredible jeweled bindings. And he used to come and stay with us in LA. He has since moved, and he doesn't have to go to LA, but he would stay for the weekend, and he would take a book out of my bookshelf and say, as a thanks for letting him stay there, he would take that book home and bind it and then send it back to us. And it was just stunning. I mean, it was these beautiful, burgundy Morocco, binding with, and I don't know, it's like wood, it's like burned in leaves and, this pattern and things. And it was just, and then he would put a little ribbon in for the place mark. So I've lived with him, not lived with him, but I've known him for years, and I sort of get all that rich, expensive book stuff from him.
Yes.
I have a few, but not a lot.
So Renee,
But that's even better because it's personal.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. So Renee
Yeah.
says, Ellie, I know that you've done a crossover novella with the main characters from both series. Would you ever consider doing a full-length novel crossover? And Kate, have you ever thought about doing a crossover with the main characters from your series? Let's start with Ellie.
Yeah, so the first introduction to my Sloan series that is set in Leavenworth and features a craft brewer, that was just kind of a marketing idea from my editor. She said, what if we just do a really short mystery to introduce the two? And that is the hardest book I've ever written in my life, because it could only be 40 pages. And there's not a lot of development you can do in 40 pages. I mean, you certainly can't. And that was kind of one of the other caveats, like no body. So they don't solve a crime. It's more like a Scooby-Doo style, like the missing keg. But I do love the idea of crossing them over. And I feel like Sloan and Jules would be really good friends. Sloan would be kind of a little bit more of a mentor maybe to Jules. So I can envision doing something like that in the future. But it was super challenging in the most unexpected way, because I thought, oh yeah, a 40-page novella, that's great. That'll be nothing. But it was so much harder than I anticipated.
And how about you, Kate?
Yeah, I have a real hard time with shorter books. They asked me to do a novella for the Bibliophiles, and I did one, and it was like 70 pages or something like that. But the problem with it was an e-novella, so they only put it out on ebook. And the problem with that is that not a lot of readers get ebooks at the time. This is, I don't know, 8 years ago or something. But because of that, you can't put anything in there that advances the story of the characters. You just have to kind of do this strange little, thing with I had Brooklyn with her mother. Her mother was going through a friend's, boxes of books and things like that. So it was just a very small little story that took place outside of the real world of Brooklyn and Derek. And it was really the hardest thing I ever had to do.
Thank you. Okay, good. Yeah. I feel better. I know. I'm like, oh, why is this so hard?
Yeah. But as far as bringing in Brooklyn with Shannon from the Fixer Uppers, I've thought about it, and I don't know. My mind, I could never write a play or, a screenplay or things like that. My mind works in a particular weird, I can't say I'm logical, believe me, I'm not. But my worlds don't cross, but I could probably make it happen. I could do it, but I don't think I will.
Pressure.
Yeah. I love the way Juliette Blackwell does it, because, she wrote some art mysteries, like art forger mysteries with her sister. And so once in a while in the Haunted Home renovation series, they'll be like, oh, we should call Annie Kincaid for this. And like, she just like mentions the character name and that's it. So you're like, oh, clearly these take place in the same world, but like Annie doesn't show up and actually help do anything. So like, does that.
Yeah. And it's like a little Easter egg for readers, because they know. Yeah.
Love it.
So since you both do multiple series, have you ever started one series and you're working on something, you're like, oh, this doesn't work, and realize that maybe like that plot or that whatever would work better for the other series? Or are you like, the characters and everything so well that that's not an issue? Let's start with Ellie.
I know. I'm trying to think. I don't think so. I never work on the same series at the same time. I write one book and I'm fully immersed in it. Like, I'm looking at my walls right now. And like I said, I'm writing book 15 of the Bakeshop. So it's all Shakespeare and chocolate and food. And then when I start working on Sloan, I will change it out and it will be beer and, lederhosen and all that good stuff. So no, they feel very different to me in my head. Like those worlds are so separate. I will say though that I was working on one, and I can't remember which book it was now, where I realized, oh, I had like a very thin plot line that was kind of the same. So I had to go back and change that, but not so much in terms of characters.
Yeah, I've never really had that problem because the worlds are so different. I mean, Shannon is a small town girl. She's she's a building contractor, specializing in Victorian homes up in Northern California. And Brooklyn is in the big city, and I don't know, her world is bigger. And I guess I could have that problem because both of them work with restoration of things. So there is some odd little crossover, but I've never had that happen. And I want to put pastries and beer on my walls now.
Yeah, exactly. It's dangerous. Don't go there, Kate. It's a slippery slope. Once you start, then you need one in your hand. And,
oh my God, I need some beer right now.
I hadn't thought of that when you say that is their point, because you're right. One's restoring a house, one's restoring books. And I guess that's kind of my food crossover, because beer and baking have a lot of similarities in the process. Yeah, that's interesting.
And Sloan bakes with beer too, right?
She does, yeah. Right.
So let's talk a little bit about kind of genre-wise. So what drew you to writing cozy mysteries? One of my favorite, I think it's Ellen Byron, who I talked with and said like she had started writing this mystery, and like her agent had said to her, did you know you're writing a cozy? And she was like, I don't even know what that is, and kind of went back and learned that like that's what she was writing. So what drew you to cozy mysteries to write? Let's start with Ellie.
I think I was born cozy. I would like to try to write something darker, but I'm terrified of dark. Like, I read thrillers or I watch thrillers with with one eye closed. I wrote my first mystery in second grade, which I still have a copy of. And it was totally a cozy because these two young girls are on their bikes that break down in front of a haunted mansion, and they go inside the haunted mansion and like cobwebs sweep across their face. And they have to spend the night in the haunted mansion. And then the next morning they find a bicycle repair kit in the basement, and they ride off together like happily ever after. So I don't think I could write a mystery, at least, that didn't have like a touch of cozy, for better or for worse, I guess. My first book was a memoir, so totally different. And I wrote a lot of nonfiction prior to writing cozies, but for fiction, it just seemed like that natural place. And then of course I have read them prolifically since I was a kid. So I think they're just in my blood.
Yeah. You should chat with Paige Shelton. She is like creating this like little subgenre that's like cozy thrillers with these Alaska.
Oh, the ice. Oh, I love. Yeah, they're great. They're so good. Great.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, like she does such a good job in that first one of like it's not cozy, but like a cozy reader wouldn't be like, oh, this is too much, and then like slowly kind of stretches that comfort level with each book. So maybe we'll see a resurgence or not a resurgence because there isn't, but like maybe we'll see like a blossoming of like cozy thrillers.
I love that. Yeah, because her first one is on thin ice, right? And it's like it's almost like a touch of misery, like Stephen King, but then it's still so cozy, and she does Alaska so well. Oh yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, how about it's cozy. You need a blanket,
right? And a pastry.
Of course. Okay. What's the question? I forgot.
So what drew you to cozies?
Okay. I wrote this book. I don't know how to even explain it. I put everything into this book. I'd been trying to get published for years and years and years. Whole backstory there. It's exciting. And I decided that this was the book that was going to go because I just came up with this crazy bookbinder idea, and it did go. It went quickly. Sold. I mean, but I didn't know it was a cozy. I didn't know what a cozy. I had never heard the word cozy. I mean, I've heard I've heard the word cozy,
Okay.
but I'd never heard it as this subgenre. And I didn't even know it was a cozy, even with all the stuff I was putting in this book, until I saw the cover of my first book with the cat and the library. And I mean, it was just beautiful, but it was kind of like, I don't have a cat in this book. Except I did. I didn't even remember. The neighbors had a cat, 2 cats, and Pookie and Splinters.
That's right.
But so I didn't even know what it was and then I found out what it was. And then with the second book, took them all to Scotland, and that's not cozy. Well, that's not, you need your community and you need your, your setting and stuff, but I didn't know what I was doing. But I love doing it. And I've tried to write dark. I've tried to write everything, science fiction, young adult vampire, you name it. I've tried to write it. I don't know. There has to be a joke.
You found your lane, though. We're all so grateful for that.
Right.
So, Ellie, one of the things that's really interesting about your series is there aren't animals. Like, I think you are one of the only, Sloan doesn't have a pet. Jules doesn't have a pet. I was actually at BoucherCon when it was in Dallas, and I got to go to the Minotaur cozy dinner with Sherry Randall and Vivian Chen and our editor. And we were talking, I was like, oh my gosh, there are no animals in these books. So how did you get away with that?
I have no idea. It's sort of sacrilegious, huh? I might get murdered myself by the rest of the cozy crew. I have never had a child in any of my series until Sloan. And she is a teenager who's almost ready to go off to college. I think initially it was just, I didn't want Jules to seem flaky, and she's doing a lot. She's making a lot of flaky crusts. So I didn't want her to neglect an animal. And I am an animal lover in my real life. I have a cat. My dog just died. I don't know. It wasn't intentional, but it is funny because my son, when I first started writing, his fun thing was to try to find the skull on the cover, where's the skull hidden in the pastry? And he was 10, and he's like, Mom, you're the only author on all of these bookshelves that has not a even glimpse of an animal. And it's never going to happen. Jules is never getting a dog until book 14. And then, no, I'm just kidding. I don't know.
So you mentioned that you're working on, or you're about to turn in book 15. So is that, but you're also doing you guys are both doing 2 books a year. So let's talk a little writing process, writing stuff. So how do you stay that ahead, and what's a typical writing day for you to bounce back and forth between 2 series? Let's start with Kate this time, because Kate, you're also doing 2 series.
Yes. I don't mix them. I have friends who can do that. I can't get out of that, rut until I'm finished. And that includes time. Well, in between the time when you finish the book and you've got revisions, and then you get copy edits, and then you get, what typeset pages, I do brainstorm the next book. And the next book is going to be the other series, because they go back and forth. That's the only time I can do that. I can't really start that book until I've finished this one and gotten it out of my head, and figured out all the problems that I have to fix and copy edits and things like that. So my process is just psychotic. I don't know what I'm doing. I write a complete plot line. I have a plotting group. My buddies, Paige Shelton and Jen McKinley, the 3 of us get together, and I always bring an idea, 6 or 8 pages of a story idea, and then we brainstorm red herrings and characters and things like that. Yeah. And I write all that down, and then I write an outline from that, and then I forget that I had an outline, and then I start writing the book, and it's just somewhere over here. And halfway through the book, I'm like, oh my God. Anyway, that's my process. Thank you.
I love that so much. It's so great that you have that energy of building off of each other with your plot group too. I think that probably adds that next layer then as well. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's good to plot with friends. I'm sounding like a librarian. It's good to read with friends. It's good to have I'm desperate for that. And even though I don't use it for halfway through the book until I remember that I did this, I had a process once.
Yeah.
It's great to get together, and then you get to go, have cocktails and party.
Have cocktails and kill people.
Yeah.
Fictionally.
And how about you, Ellie?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same, except I just write a terrible, horrible, awful first draft really fast in like 6 weeks. I do outline everything before I start. And outline sounds formal. It's much more like sketches. And then I have a harder time getting out of my head. Once I'm in a book, I'm sort of in that world. And so the gift for me of writing 2 series has been, I write that bad first draft and I just like take copious notes of everything that I need to fix. And then I put that away and I don't touch it for like 3 months. And then I start sketching out, a Sloan. So if I finish a Jules book, then I'm switching gears and I'm working on Sloan. And I think the thing that helps my brain is it takes me out of that world. And so then I can go back to that draft with really fresh eyes and go, oh, okay, this is terrible. Now I can see where it's all falling apart. So the first Bakeshop isn't necessarily done, but like the bones of it is done. And then I'll go back to it and like really edit and layer stuff in. Yeah.
So do you find deadlines scary or helpful?
Oh dear. I find them a suggestion. They're very helpful because I need a deadline or I will just be a complete lunatic until I need an end date to go forward, to go for. So I'm happy with deadlines.
I know. I feel like I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but I sort of love a deadline. Wow. I think structure's good because it keeps you focused and on track, and it's that target that you have to hit. So yeah, I'm a fan of deadlines. I wasn't in college, but now I'm like, give me a deadline. What do I need to do? How are we going to get this book done right now?
Right.
So Lisa wants to know, do you take a break after finishing a book before you begin the next book in a series? So like you've got one done, Ellie, you said you kind of put a draft away and go back, but like once the book is finished, do you like, oh, I'm going to take a little bit of time, refill the creative well, or are you like, I'm going to jump immediately right into the next one? Let's start with Ellie.
I never jump right into the next one. I definitely need a little brain break, but usually by the time a book is done, like Kate's saying, you go through a lot of rounds of edits within the house too. Like I edit myself 2 or 3 times at least with a first, second, third, and sometimes fourth draft. And then there's a longer editing process with the publishing house. So I would say I'm already, kind of excited and thinking like, ooh, what's going to happen next with these characters? So usually I might take like a week or 2 off before I start like a new sketch and really thinking about what's going to happen next.
Yeah, I'll take a week or 2 off and then get back to it. I mean, I'm always usually at my desk because I'm, reading emails and dealing with the business end of it. But I have taken time off. I plan for vacations and things, not lately, not in the last year and a half, but I want to go back to Scotland, so I will plan that in there, and it'll be at finishing after I've finished a book. So whenever that happens, but I usually just take a week or 2. Same thing.
Yeah. So let's talk covers, because you guys both have great covers. Do you get any input? Like, Ellie, do you get to say like, oh, I want because since yours all have these like very vibrant colors, do you get to say like, oh, I want it to be pink this time? Or so do either of you get to like have any input?
Usually what I do is when I finish a book or when I finish a sketch, because the cover is earlier in the process than you might think, I will send my editor sort of an idea of what the book's about, and like coffee, or give some notes on that. And then, yes, I love getting to do colors. In fact, Chilled to the Cone was going to be bright yellow, and it was too close to Meet Your Baker. So I was like, what about a blue? The one cover that I really want that we haven't done yet is like a brown. I want like a chocolate brown with pink, but I haven't found the book for that yet.
Sounds good. My covers, I have some input. I usually send pictures to my editor, and we usually, at least in the past, we've picked a room. Like in the very beginning, it was a library, and then for one book where the book she was working on was a rare copy of the Kama Sutra. The cover was a bedroom, but it was this beautifully, they were draped and, gorgeous tapestries and things like that. Mm-hmm. You wouldn't even know it was a bedroom, I don't think, but that was the whole idea. And in the cookbook Conspiracy, it was a kitchen with an old-fashioned stove and things like that. And I usually send pictures, and I usually have an idea of what I want, and they just do it. They run with it. It's great. And it always turns out so much better and prettier than I could ever imagine. I always send a picture of the cat that's going to be featured, unless it's Brooklyn's cat. Brooklyn and Derek have a cat that Derek brought home, a little kitten for Brooklyn, and it was true love. But when she's at the library or when she's somewhere else, there's a different cat. So I always go out and find a picture of a cat, and that's kind of ridiculous and fun. I don't know. In this book, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a castle, and that is an actual castle that's on the shores of Loch Ness. And it's so gorgeous. And I sent them a picture, and I mean, they changed a few things, but they kind of kept the castle just the way it looks. And there's a log bench, and I sent a picture of that, things like that, and a golf clubs and things like that. Just send pictures and ideas, and they put it all together and make it look so nice.
Sorry, my cat just tried to knock over my writing table.
Speaking of cats,
they were fighting earlier, and one of them was falling off of a filing cabinet, like hanging off of it. So they're being ornery. So Ellie, Cindy wants to know who came up with the idea of putting the skull on your covers.
I don't know. I think it must have been the cover artist. I've never asked that question, but like Kate, I'm always just. It's as if somebody because I'm not artistic at all. I'm not very visual. I'm much more auditory. And so it's like somebody stepping into my brain, because I think, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I imagine Tort to look like. So I'm going to ask Cindy. I will ask. I will find out. But I think it must have been the original Meet Your Baker. It started with that, and then it's been a thing all the way since.
So and part of it is if you look at kind of older cozies, especially the ones that came out like in the 80s and 90s, that was kind of that's how kind of one of the reasons you knew it was a cozy, because there would be some kind of skull on the cover somehow, and a lot similarly in the way that they are on Ellie's or in the Vivian Chen's, where it's like, oh, it's spilled in like the soy sauce in a dish or something. So that used to be kind of a really, which is one of the things I love that St. Martin's does, is they've kind of kept that going, especially if you look at like kind of the older Kensington ones. It's always funny to see kind of how they put a skull on the cover. So Kate, Diana wants to know what castle in Scotland was it that for the cover?
Oh my God, I can't remember the name of it. It's just outside of Inverness. It's right on Loch Ness, and it is. You can rent it. And it comes with a chef and servants and people that clean your rooms and things like that. But the catch is that you have to rent the whole castle.
No problem.
So you have to find you and 40 of your closest friends. But they also have 4 cottages on the property, and one is right on the water, and that would be kind of fun. But if you're in the cottage, you can't use the chef, and that's, So I just like the picture.
I don't know. I'm thinking your next plotting group, maybe you just give them a call. You say, Bentley's already giving me a car, so I need to come to Scotland and really experience the castle for book, I don't know, 8. Yeah.
I'll try that.
Okay.
So we have Stephanie Perkins, who's watching. She writes as, for those of you who may not know, she writes as S.C. Perkins, who we adore. She actually brought us some really delicious cookies yesterday when she stopped in the store to pick up Kate and Ellie's newest books. And I didn't mention this when I did my intro. Her new book, Fatal Family Ties, comes out later in July, and we're going to be doing a virtual event with her, Esme Addison, and Sherry Harris. And I'm going to drop a link in the chat. You can actually pre-order copies of Stephanie's books, and she's going to be dropping by to sign for. So I've dropped out. But she wants to know, for both of you, who is your favorite secondary character to write? Let's start with Ellie.
Also, her new book cover is incredible. Talk about covers. The ancestry with the trees. They just, every time I see them, I can only imagine what your bookbinder friend would do with those, Kate. Yeah, amazing. Well, hands down, Lance. Lance is by far my favorite character. He is the artistic director of the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. I know exactly what he's going to say. He's Jules' sidekick, her best friend. I've loved developing him over the course of the series, and I have more that I want to do with him. He is kind of an amalgam of 2 of my very dear friends mashed together. So he's super easy for me to write. And I just love that, especially because these books are set in Ashland, which is it is not out of the realm of possibilities that when I go down to the plaza tonight later for First Friday, I will see someone in like a Shakespeare costume, or, it's just, it's very whimsical. And so I like getting to play on those aspects with him too. And he always gets Jules into lots of trouble.
Yeah, I love him. My favorite character, well, it's probably Derek, because from the very beginning, I just pictured James Bond, and you could pick your favorite of the James Bonds and see him in your head. And he was very, very suave and very sexy. And he accused her of murder. And of course, they fall in love, of course, as everyone does on their first date. But as far as quirky characters, it's probably her mother, Brooklyn's mother, who is an old hippie, an old deadhead, and they follow the dead around the country, and they have 6 children, and they're all named after the towns that they stopped in. Either they were conceived there, or they were born there, or whatever it is. So there's Austin and Jackson and Brooklyn and Savannah and China and London. Yeah. They, there was a protest at China Lake. So one of the daughters is China. And so I love her. She's a kick. And she gets, if you get near her and you're sort of out of sorts, she'll want to adjust your chakras and things like that. So she's fun, really fun.
She's the best.
So that reminds me, one of the questions I had that I had skipped, talking about kind of Derek and kind of James Bond and all that. So you guys both come at policing from a different perspective than I think that we see in a lot of cozies. Usually in cozies, the amateur sleuth is completely getting in the way. They're exasperating the detectives. The detectives are like, "Ugh, you're in the way. Stop doing this. You're interfering." But for both of you, Kate, with you have, Derek, and he has these connections, and Brooklyn, knows the police chief. She has like phone numbers and stuff like that. So she works really well. And with you, Ellie, she's related to, either the police chief, or she has this very close friendship with Thomas. You guys both come from it where they're actually kind of working with some of the law enforcement. Can you talk a little bit about the decision to go that route versus having them kind of butting heads with the local police? Let's start with Ellie.
Yeah, I think when I started, I sort of knew that part of what I wanted to do was not always have Juliet solve the crime, which is not necessarily like what you think of in the box with the cozy. And so I thought the way around that was to have her have a deep relationship with the professor. And the professor's not exactly what you think of in terms of a true detective, but really is representative of real life here in Ashland. Like, Thomas lives in Ashland, I kid you not. His name is really Officer Matt. He patrols the streets in his shorts. He's the nicest man ever. If he meets someone who's unhoused or in need of any sort of services, he knows them by name. Like, there is just kind of a different, and especially in light of, kind of more recent issues with policing, it's been good to give Jules somebody else who allows her onto the crime scene, but she still doesn't always come up with the killer in every book. In fact, oftentimes she's really wrong, which I sort of love.
That's one of the things I love about the first book in the series, and so I tell people when I sell them Meet Your Baker, is that I love that you get to see her like completely bumble her way through that first investigation and accuse like 6 people of murder, and then have to be like, oh, hi neighbor, I'm sorry I accused you of murdering somebody.
Right. But here's some pastry, like, yeah.
I have Derek, who was MI6. And what's good about Derek, even though he's not a policeman, he has connections with law enforcement, and he has his own security company. So he does bodyguards, and he sends people, people who are rich people who are in need of security. He takes care of that kind of stuff, and he goes all around the world. But he's also the kind of guy, because he was a commander in the Royal Navy. The police are very respectful of him, as opposed to pushing him away, which they will push Brooklyn away and just kind of look at her like, what are you doing here? With Derek, they call him the commander, and it's, they'll share their secrets with him. So that works out. And Brooklyn has wormed her way into the heart of the local detective inspector, who's this gorgeous, in my mind, she's this gorgeous Chinese American woman who dresses impeccably and always shows up in this, some incredible Burberry coat and little booties and things. Anyway, Brooklyn admires her and loves her and thinks she's the hottest thing in the world. So they all kind of get along. I don't know why. In Shannon, in the Fixer Uppers, her guy Mac is a thriller writer, and he was a Navy SEAL. So he's got kind of the same kind of background that Derek has in terms of respecting and relating to the local law enforcement. And it's a small town, so they're all friends, so that works out too.
So we have a question. It's actually from Kathy Stillwell, who couldn't watch tonight, but she had asked this question on Facebook, on your Facebook page, Kate. So somebody was passing it along. She says, I have one big question for you that must be on everyone's minds. Will the new home and Dharma be available for our viewing in the next book?
Yes, it's taken like 3 books for them to
Finally.
Okay, just 2 books, but
It's COVID. Supplies have been hard, so they're just catching up. It's okay.
It's been hard to get stuff there.
Yeah.
But yeah, the next book they'll actually stay there, and that's such a cute story. That's a cute question. You just write these books in isolation, and you don't really know if anything gets through to anyone. But the fact that everybody's wondering if they're going to live in their new house. Yes, they are. And it's going to be a beautiful little craftsman house overlooking the vineyards and the little stream that goes through the canyon down below, and murders will happen there too.
So I can't believe an hour has gone by already. This has been so much fun chatting with you guys. So before we head out, I know you have both just released new books that came out Tuesday. I'm sure everybody also wants to know, what do you have coming up next? Let's start with Ellie.
Let's see. Next is the paperback of book 4 of the Sloan Krause Mysteries, Without a Brew, comes out at the end of August. And then book 5, The Cure for What Ails You, comes out in October. Yeah. And then book 14 of Bakeshop, which is titled Bake, Borrow, and Steal, comes out in December. And that's going to involve a heist at the museum here. So,
ooh, I hadn't heard that yet. Exciting.
Yeah.
That's great. Let's see. Okay, this book is out now. The next book that comes out in December or late November is a fixer-upper, and it's called Absence of Mallets.
I love that title so much.
So good.
So good.
So good.
And then the next Bibliophile will come out next June, and it has a title, but I don't know if I'm supposed to tell you.
No. Right.
I'll tell you in the backstage.
So before we go, let's actually talk about titles for a minute, because Absence of Mallets is fantastic. Mocha, she wrote great titles. So do you guys come up with titles, or do you come up with some of them? Is it a committee? How's that work? Let's start with Kate.
My titles, they're funny. The book titles, the Bibliophiles are all, I try to get a book in there somehow. Mm-hmm. Book or paper or, cover, murder undercover, and but they're not as punny as the fixer-uppers or as Ellie's are, that are so great. But I like my book titles. I fight with Jen McKinley over book titles. She gets a good one. Books Can Be Deceiving was her first one. I just wanted to kill her. But the fixer-upper mysteries have great punny titles, I think. The Absence of Mallets is one, and the one that's out right now is Premeditated Mortar, and I love that. and I don't come up with all of them. I come up with it's about half and half, but I have an assistant who is an angel, and her husband is a man of all trades. He can do anything around the house, and he works with a lot of tools. So he comes up with these things, and she'll just write out of the blue. She'll say, "Oh, I have an idea for your next book." And when I hear her titles, it's like, okay, I'm going to center a whole book around mallets, because so she comes up with some of those, but those are my favorite titles in that series.
So good.
Ellie's are just the best ever.
It's kind of a family affair. I always have a working title for the start of the book, but it's rarely the title that I end up with. But like my husband and my son, who started when I was writing, he was in first grade when I was writing my first mystery. Now he's almost off to college. But we would brainstorm titles around the dinner table. So I have always been waiting for a call from school. Why is your child obsessed with murderous puns? But I could spend all day punning on titles. And I have heard that people who use puns are highly intelligent. So I'm sticking with that. Yeah. Yes. It's probably not true, but sure, we'll claim it.
My in-laws are all very punny people too, and there's always some point at a family gathering where my husband and my nephews and brother-in-law finally I'll just be okay, we're done, no more. I can't handle any more this evening. Or one of them will start and no, we're not doing this tonight.
Yeah, it's bad dad jokes on steroids, right? Yeah.
So this has been so much fun tonight. If anybody has joined us late, we have been chatting with Kate Carlisle, whose new book, Little Black Book, just came out Tuesday. It's the newest in the Bibliophile Mystery series. And we've been chatting with Ellie Alexander, whose Mocha, she wrote also came out this last Tuesday, and it is the newest in the Bakeshop series. We have signed book plates for both books, and we have all of the other books in the series in stock. So if you haven't ordered yet, you can visit murderbooks.com or come visit us in store. If you missed any part of the chat, once we are done, Facebook and YouTube will archive it, so you'll be able to go back and rewatch. While you were there, if you're on YouTube, I've created a playlist for all of the Cozy Author events that we've done, as well as some recommendation videos that we've done. We got to chat with Ellie last summer. I'm not even going to remember Nothing But Trouble. When Nothing But Trouble came out, we chatted with her. So if you want to see that one, you can go back and scroll through. As I mentioned, coming up at the end of July on the 22nd, we'll be chatting with S.C. Perkins, Esme Addison, and Sherry Harris. We'll be back in store in September with Miranda James. So lots of great stuff coming up. Thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. Ellie and Kate, thank you so much for chatting with us. Also, thank you from all of the readers out there for giving us these, wonderful, cozy books that we can get lost in, especially the last year and a half where things have been just crazy. It's been wonderful to kind of disappear into these wonderful cozies and have them kind of spread joy and be able to have customers come in and be able to kind of give them something that will help them kind of distract them from the world. So thank you both so much for joining us this evening. This has been an absolute blast.
Thank you, John. It's been fun.
Thank you, John.
Really
Yeah.
fun.
So you guys take care, and hopefully next time we get to do this, we'll actually get to do it with both of you in the store. So fingers crossed.
Yes, absolutely.
Y'all take care. We'll see you soon.
You too. Bye.